being addressed by what you're now saying.
Yeah.
The key issue is, historically, have Muslims understood 929, which could be understood as an excuse to expand the political realm of Islam based upon the religious affiliation?
People have argued like
attacked,
that. Yeah.
Have Islamic scholars traditionally understood that to be restrained by Surah 60, Ayah 8?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Because I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because we're dealing with a topic on we're dealing with non-Muslims treatment, right?
I don't
Generally.
think we are. So you're talking about Sorry, just to clarify. We're
talking about the policy of non-Muslims in conflict, right?
But I'm talking about the policy towards non-Muslims outside of the Islamic State, whereas it sounds like you're talking about the policy towards non-Muslims within the Islamic State.
No, even outside of the Islamic State, non-Muslims who want peace or desire peace, no hostilities against them. Well, how do we know this?
Okay.
From the life of the Prophet. Prophet had treaties with the Jewish tribes. The Prophet had treaties with almost over 10 Jewish tribes who are mentioned in the Treaty of Medina. Okay, so you see, I'm talking to Richard now. He's a decent Christian. I can talk to him all day. Okay, I'm talking to this Christian gentleman who's filming our discussion. So the Prophet is Jewish tribes are mentioned by name who had a treaty with the Prophet. Some of them, they went against the treaty and attacked the Muslims, and then they were fought. Okay, the Prophet fought them, and one tribe in particular was fighting men were executed. Other two tribes, they were exiled to outside Arabia. Okay, so it is now clear that the policy of Muslims or Islam with regards to non-Muslims is that the default policy is that you live in peace, you live in harmony, you don't fight them, you don't look for trouble. Okay, if they attack you, then you can retaliate. You can defend yourselves. Okay, but if someone wants peace, you can't go out and start making trouble with them and attacking them.
But with that particular point, it may well be the case that Muhammad had peace towards these Jewish tribes, but they were within the community. Which isn't the point I'm kind of addressing. So the way that a lot of non-Muslims interpret 929 is this was a universal mandate to go and attack people outside of the political realm of Islam for the sake of their religion. Non-Muslims will often say this is what happened with the Islamic conquests after Muhammad. That's a different scenario to what's happening in Medina.
Okay, I understand your question now. You're talking about two concepts in Islam: the jihad, the defensive jihad, and the progressive jihad, what they call the progressive jihad. Okay, so can Muslims attack other nations as a nation? This is an academic question now. Okay, we're discussing. Can Muslim nations attack other nations unprovoked? No. The answer is no. Okay, they cannot. Okay, now with regards to expansion, the early Islamic expansion, what were the causes? Why did the Muslims go out and fight other nations? The Romans were attacking them. The Persians were attacking them. The Persian emperor was actually threatening the Prophet of Islam. Okay, so we have examples. Now, what if there are people who are being oppressed in another nation and they invite the Muslims to intervene? Okay, foreign intervention, what we call.
Then that might be legitimate. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, I feel we're going down a different route. For whatever reason, Muslims in reality did go out and expand the reign of Islam, whether that's in self-defense, whether that's liberation, whatever.
They did, no doubt.
You made a statement that Muslims are not allowed to attack those who are not attacking them.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
I've still not seen that backed up. Could you back that up for me?
Throughout Islamic history, the life of the Prophet, the entire life of the Prophet.
Okay.
The entire life of the Prophet, he never attacked anyone unprovoked. Never.
Let me rephrase it. Okay, to take a slightly polemical tone, I'm not presenting this, someone could present this.
Yeah, sure.
How can you say that Muslims can only attack in self-defense in the light of 929? You then brought up 68, and then...
No, even 929. Even 929 clarifies the context.
Okay, good.
Because 929 is talking about Romans. The sabab al-nuzul, the reason. Sorry, how do we know?
Yes.
From hadith, from the prophetic tradition. For example, in Bukhari, for example, we have a report that when the Prophet was he was thought to have divorced his wives, and one of Umar's daughters, Hafsa, was married to the Prophet, and Umar heard that the Prophet divorced his wives. So. Not Omar, sorry, one of the Prophet's companions came running to the house of Omar to tell him that Prophet has divorced his wives, which was a rumor, which was not true. When he knocked the door and Omar opened the door, the first question Umar asked, why are you knocking my door like that? Have the Romans come? Okay, so this highlights the fact that the Muslims were expecting an invasion by the Romans. Okay, how do we know this? The Battle of Muta. The Battle of Muta. When one of the Prophet's messengers was killed by the bordering tribes, you know, these are Arab bordering tribes. They were allies of the Romans, and one of the tribal leaders had killed one of the messengers of the Prophet. That's why he sent an expedition with 3,000 men to retaliate or to avenge the murder of that messenger. And the Romans fought the Muslims. 3,000 Muslims fought Romans, Muslims are outnumbered by large, and they retreated into the desert, led by Khalid bin Walid. So now after this skirmish, the Muslims are expecting the Romans to invade. Okay, so this verse was revealed in that context, in chapter 9.
So I guess I might want to say, let's assume I accept all these sources. Historically, everything you said is true. The Muslims were anticipating attacks by the Romans, or at least that was a real threat. And correlation does not equal causation.
Yeah.
So even if it was the case that the Muslims thought the Romans may attack, how do you know that is the reason 929 was given, as opposed to it being correlatory? That is, it happened to be the case that they thought that the Romans might attack, but even if that weren't the case, they were still saying you can fight those who don't believe. Yeah. Especially given the explicitly religious language of 929.
I understand your point. That you're saying that the verse could be applied generally by Muslims.
Yeah, so it could be, the cultural reasons you've given me, but it doesn't have to be.
But it wasn't applied generally. How do we know that? Historically, Muslims never behaved like that. Muslims never attacked other nations unprovoked. Never. Well, you will. In every single case, there was a reason why Muslims ended up in a conflict with another nation. It was either the other nation was conspiring against Muslims, like the Romans. A number of times were sending in spies, and they were provoking Muslims to attack, and Muslims attacked in retaliation. So we know that historically that these verses were not applied like that. Yeah, that's how we know that the meaning of the verses cannot be taken out of context. Someone cannot simply go into a tube or into a shopping mall or into a concert, for that matter, and blow up people and use, because our literature, our theology is so watertight, no one can simply justify mass murder or genocide from our sources. This is why, I don't know if you'll agree with me, this is why there are so little examples of genocide in the history of Islam. The only example you will find is Armenian genocide, which was actually done by young Turks. It wasn't the Ottoman government. It were not the Ottomans who were responsible for that genocide. It were the young Turks, a secular group of young Turkish officers who had taken over the government, and they are the ones who did this. So you will not find an example of genocide. For Timur Lane is another example. Okay, Timur the Lame. You know, he was a conqueror in Central Asia in the 14th century. He died in the early 15th century. You don't know Timur Lane? Timur the Lame, he's known, or also known as Timur Lane. Okay, check him out. Okay, he conducted many massacres, okay, of his opponents, but most of his victims were Muslims. Amazingly, none of his victims were non-Muslims. He systematically destroyed the Islamic Empire. He even fought the Ottoman Emperor and captured him. Likewise, the first Mughal Emperor Babur conducted. He carried out massacres. Muslims.
So let me just wind it back a bit. So let's accept all that.
Sorry for interrupting. Do we find examples of genocide in Muslim history like we do in Christian history?
I don't really know.
Historically.
Not that I know of, no, but I don't really know Muslim history.
Okay. It's an interesting question you can look into.
Sure.
But when it comes to Christian history, you know what I'm talking about, right? There were a number of genocides, cases of cannibalism. I'm not saying Christianity is responsible for it. I'm not an extremist like that. Okay, I know people misbehaved historically in a number. As far as Christianity is concerned, the reason I blame Christianity is for one. I mean, I believe Christianity didn't provide enough solutions to its followers. That's why they ended up committing atrocities like this. Okay, because Christians were left without any clear instructions from Jesus. What do you do when you fight? What do you do with the war, enemies who are captured in war?
Sure.
What do you do with the children and women of enemies?
Sure, well, I'd say that Jesus did lay down some of those frameworks, but I mean, I'm not really looking to...
His framework was general. Love, compassion. We know Jesus taught these things.
Yeah, I mean, Christianity teaches more in general terms. Islam gives more specific prescriptions. I don't think anyone denies that.
Yeah.
Just to roll back, though, so whenever we think about genocide, that's not really the topic I'm looking to get into.
Yeah.
So let's assume you're right, that the Quran says, you should only be fighting in self-defense, you shouldn't be fighting people because of their religion, etc. Why then is there such a... Cause I've tried to read Surah 9 in the light of that framework, in the light of what many Muslims here at Speaker's Corner have told me.
Sorry, go repeat the question again.
I've tried to read Surah 9 in the light of the idea you just presented, that is, Islam does not condone fighting people for their religion.
Yeah.
But when I've tried to read Surah 9 that way, I've struggled, because so much of Surah 9 doesn't just seem to be about, fight those who pose a threat to you.
Do you have a Quran?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, take it out.
So much of it, the language seems, and the language and the justification does seem to be religious.
Let's read the next verse. The very next verse, verse 30. Verse 30. I see your point.
Okay.
So, it's chapter 9, verse 29 states, fight against such of those who have been given the scripture as believe not in Allah nor the last day, and forbid not that what Allah has forbidden by his messenger, and follow not the religion of truth until they pay the tribute readily being brought low. Even if we were to stop here, not go further, it's clear that it's talking about non-believers who are fighting you. How do we know this? The option of jizya is there. The option of jizya is there. Okay. If they choose to pay jizya, you don't fight them. It's forbidden to fight them. If non-Muslims are subdued, for example, if they have become weaker militarily, okay, and they have chosen not to fight anymore, okay, you're not fighting them. Okay, it's not indiscriminate fighting just because they're disbelievers. No.
But this doesn't rule that out. It's quite possible, as many here believe, for example, that Muslim armies can attack non-Muslim countries because of their religion until they pay jizya, in which case they don't have to be killed.
Yeah.
That doesn't. The fact that jizya is there doesn't at all rule out the possibility they're being fought for their religion. That fits just as well into both frameworks.
I see your point that they're simply being fought for their religion. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the point you're making.
Given what you're saying, I would expect verses like this to say, fight those who fight you until they stop fighting, and then Allah is most merciful, whatever. But the stress of this and verse 30, which if I may just read, and the Jews say Ezra is the son of Allah, and the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. That is, they're saying with their mouths, they imitate the saying of those who disbelieved of old, Allah's curse be on them how they are to be from the truth, and it carries on. Yeah. The overwhelming stress, the theme of these verses seem to be, they are wrong in their religion, and that's why you should fight them.
Okay, that's very interesting. If that's the case, if the command was to generally fight them, okay, for their religion, then Muslims would have been in perpetual warfare with Jews and Christians. There would be no periods of peace. Now, jizya is not the only option, by the way. Okay. We have another option called ahad. Ahad is a treaty. Okay. It's a term of peace. For example, Muslim nations throughout history were in peace with Romans. Okay. They were in peace with North African governments. Even in Spain, Muslims were in peace with northern governments.
I mean, from what I understand of historic jihad theory, the fact that the Quran might command violence against non-Muslims doesn't mean they perpetually have to be. No. You could have a just to talk for 1 minute. Sorry. You could have a peace treaty if in the long run it helped Muslim strategy, etc. So the fact that there were times of peace doesn't disprove that. In fact, and also I would say, Christians don't always follow their religion perfectly. Muslims don't always follow their religion perfectly. Yeah. What I want to know is, without appealing to later history, why is the theme of these verses so religiously oriented?
In what sense?
As in, it seems to say, fight those who do not believe, and then the following verses are explaining their theological errors and how God's curse is upon them.
Okay,
if it's just about threats to the Muslim community, why is it so much religion?
You do know that we read the Quran holistically, right?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, we interpret the Quran in the light of the Quran. Okay, the first reason I've already given you, chapter 8, chapter 60, verse 8. Yes. Clarifies that point. Your question is addressed by that particular part. Why? Because even that verse is talking about conflict. It's talking about conflict.
Good. So now we're coming back to that. I think that was a really important verse. I think we went off that verse because we started discussing other reasons as well.
Let's read the verse again.
Good.
So we understand the context. It's actually talking about conflict. Okay. It's not talking about a standard normal situation. Allah forbids you not those who did not make war against you on account of religion and did not drive you out from your homes, that you should show them kindness and deal justly with them. Allah loves the just dealers. So it is clear that your understanding, as you're saying that people can misunderstand it that way, and people can be in perpetual warfare with Christians and Jews because of that verse. I'm saying that's not possible if you read the Quran holistically. If you read the Quran as one text, as one uniform text, it is not possible to interpret that verse in that way. Also, another point I wanted to raise was chapter 2, again, reading the Quran as a uniform text. Fight in the way. Chapter 2, verse 190. Fight in the way of Allah against those who fight against you. But begin not hostilities. So you should not be the ones to begin hostilities. Allah loves not aggressors. And slay them wherever you find them, and drive them out of the places from where they drove you out. For persecution is worse than slaughter. So if you're being persecuted, fight back. Don't just sit there and turn the other cheek, like Christianity, like the Christians believe, right? So,
like some Christians believe.
And fight not with them at the inviolable places of worship until they first attack you there. So if they attack you, see, when you read the Quran, it's all about if they attack you, if they attack you, then fight back, okay? And don't, So again, this means in a state of war, and only the governments can decide. Tom, Dicks, and Harrys walking on the street, individual Muslims cannot apply these verses on the masses at large.
So there are a couple of points I wish to make. Thank you. A couple of points I wish to make. One is about, at some point, maybe later on, I'd like to ask you, if we were just interpreting this verse on its own, do you see my point about the religious language? But first of all, before we go there, I want to say, historically, have Muslim, jurists, legal schools, etc., interpreted these verses to whatever that was, 185, whatever it was, and 68. Have they interpreted those verses in the light of being abrogated by 929? From what I understand, many in the Islamic legal tradition have considered 929, the sword verse, a very late verse, to override these other verses.
No doubt. You're absolutely.
So why should Muslims today?
The Shafi school of thought in particular, you're absolutely correct. You're right. Okay. The Shafi school of thought is known as the hawkish school of thought in that sense.
Is it just the Shafis?
Just the Shafis. The Shafis. The Hanbalis, the Hanafis, and the Malikis, which are the overwhelming majority of the Muslims. So the Shafis, who are the Shafis? Who are we talking about? We're talking about not even 5% of Muslims today. Okay, Shafis are mainly in Yemen, in Somalia, and some parts of India, and that's pretty much it. Where else? Indonesia and Malaysia, the most peaceful Muslims on the planet. So the most passive Muslim on the planet, Indonesian and Malaysians, and amazingly, no army was sent to them. So Shafi school of thought, some of the jurists from the Shafi school of thought had argued like that, that this verse means war by default with non-Muslims. War by default.
But that's a minority perspective in Islam.
And that perspective was never accepted as the norm. It was never upheld by Muslim scholars and Muslim governments, historically speaking. This is why we see so little example of Muslims attacking other nations unprovoked. There may be examples. Some people might have followed occasionally the Shafi view, but that view is actually not accepted. It is a view. It is there. It is based upon this very verse. You're not wrong in pointing that out, but majority of the Muslims don't follow that view. Likewise, there are other views, erroneous ideas in Islamic literature. Some people have expressed certain views. They are not accepted. Majority of the scholars come out and condemn.
Great. So that's fine.
Sorry, guys. We're gonna move.
closer to a drug. I understand.
Well, someone's
Absolutely.
smoking something, huh?
That's it. Is that what you're trying to get?